All right. Well, Alexis,
Yeah,
thank you for taking the time to sit down with me.
of course. I'm happy to be here.
How would you describe yourself to a room full of people who don't know you?
Describe me as like myself or like my business.
Either or both. This is part of the interesting part of this question for me is
I
where
know.
do people go when I
Yeah.
ask about who are you?
Okay. Well, my brain first went to like just me as a person, even though I really do like love my business and I love what I do. And it is such a big part of me. I used to only identify with my business and it was like, this is just me. And I don't have any other things about me. But I would say I'm confident, loud, energetic, and I am that person that when you're around, I'm going to make you want to bring out the side of you that you don't always show. You know, we sometimes mask when we're out and about, but like I'm just not that person at all. And I feel like when people are around me, they feel comfortable to kind of just like let out their actual side. And so I really like that about myself. And so yeah, I feel like I have been put on this earth to help people find that side of them, whether it be in my business or with my friends or with whoever. And there's a million other things I could say about myself, but I really think like that to me is like what I'm really proud of
Mhm.
and like what sticks out for me.
I hear that as an amplifier in a
Yeah.
sense, like you are an amplifier of things that people sometimes turn down.
Mhm. Yeah.
Cool. No, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Could you share a little bit about the path that's led you to where you are? And that could maybe be a little bit more of a business loaded question or life in
Yeah.
general in terms of where does that go?
Yeah. So I went to school to be a high school history teacher.
Oh.
Realized as I was doing my student teaching in my senior year, I was like, I don't really like these kids. I was like, I love them, like want the best for them, but I just couldn't do it. And so I still graduated with my degree, but kind of had like a quarter life crisis and decided like 12 days after I graduated to move across the country. I was in Philly, moved from Philly all the way to the West Coast with a guy I'd been dating. And my friends knew it, my parents knew it, but I didn't know it. But it was a very abusive relationship. And so I went anyway. And when we got to Washington, we were going to get this car and we were going to drive to LA and we were going to become actors and actresses. And it was going to just be like this whole beautiful like story. And because this guy was like the worst and a pathological liar, when we got to LA, the place that he said existed, where we were going to live with these people, didn't exist. He kind of just like
Mhm.
I think wanted to trick me to move with him. So I was homeless for like 3 months, sleeping out of my car, showering on the Santa Monica beach in my bathing suit, like brushing my teeth in Target parking lots, or not parking lots, in Target bathrooms, but I was sleeping in Target parking lots. And so that kind of was the catalyst, I would say, for other things that happened. And so once I finally got out of that relationship, I had a few different experiences that made me realize that I was throwing a pity party. And yes, bad things had happened to me. And yes, they sucked and I didn't deserve them, but I was responsible for making those changes. And so through a series of events, I struggled with eating disorders and all these things that kind of like brought me to this point where I was like, my life and my health and my mental health is just, it's not it. And so I started just puzzle piecing how to make my life a little bit better, physically, mentally, all of that. And so I really started with food. And I wanted to eat better. And so I started sharing actually on Tumblr first. I don't know if you know what Tumblr is,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
Tumblr first and then Instagram. And I started as a vegan recipe page because that was my first try at nutrition. I was like, I'm going to be a vegan. And then I switched that to paleo, and then I was a paleo recipe page. And then from there up until now, it had changed from being a holistic health coach because I got my certification from IIN, started coaching people one-on-one. Then I got in more into fitness, did network marketing for like 8 years, and then moved a little bit more into like life coaching, business coaching. And I still consider myself a life coach that helps
Hmm.
with business, not the other way around, even the majority of my clients are entrepreneurs. Because to me, the logistics of business are the easy part. Like figuring out like how to figure out your program and all of that. Like, yes, you can need help with that, but the internal things, the work that we need to do in order to shift in the way that we want, that's the hard part. And so I have changed my mind. This is the thing I talk about a lot within, business. People are so afraid to change their mind. And like I work with a lot of people with ADHD, and people with ADHD tend to have this thing where they have so many ideas that they're afraid if they pick one, they're going to get bored. And so they're so afraid to settle on an idea, or if they change their mind, and it's all these things. So I really have lived and breathed the whole idea of changing my mind a million times, and I continue to shift that. So yeah, that's kind of, there's lots of other things in between, but that's really what
Yeah,
has brought me to this point.
that's interesting. How did you come across the tough love coach as your handle? Like, what does that mean for you, or where did that come from?
Yeah, so I've always loved tough love. I played sports my whole life, and I've always more so resonated with the coaches, male or female. I've always kind of leaned more towards the male coaches because they were a little bit more tough love. But I definitely had a travel volleyball coach that was extremely tough love. Her and I, it was almost so much tough love we didn't get along. But I always just vibed with that, and not and what I share on like my podcast and on my social media is that I'm redefining like what tough love means, because it's not like the screaming David Goggins like get your shit together type thing. It's more of like coming to the things that we need to do with a place of compassion, or from a place of compassion. And something I say often is successful people have honest conversations with themselves. And so that is really where the tough love is. It's not being mean to yourself. It's more of like, I need to have an honest conversation. I can't keep, even with ADHD, I just had a whole podcast episode on this. Yes, ADHD is a real thing. We struggle with it. Our brain is different, but that doesn't mean you just get to use it as an excuse all the time to like not get
Mhm.
your shit together. So that's kind of where that tough love comes in. So it's just something that I've always resonated with. It's been more motivating for me. And I'm just not, and not that this is a bad thing, because there's a time and place for it. I'm on the other side of it, but there's that side of coaching and, kind of what we do of the more feminine side of like, I see you, I hear you, let's, be gentle. And I love that. I need that in
Mhm.
my life. And I still am that way in my coaching, but I'm a little bit more towards like people who come to me always say, I love my therapist and we've been doing great, but honestly, like I need somebody that's going to light a fire on my under my
Yeah,
ass. That's kind of
same.
like what I
Yeah,
do. So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting. There's a lot of parallels, like even though we have very different life paths, but what you said about um, business coaching versus life coaching, I feel very similarly about personal training and life coaching or mindset stuff. It's like personal training is great, but people go to the gym for a reason. And usually it's a piece of control. And it's like, well, where's that coming from? And why are you unhappy in your life? And, what else is spiraling or chaotic? And how
Yeah.
can we address those things with like tangible action steps that are not so much in the feminine? It's like, yes, life can be hard.
Mhm.
And what the fuck are we going to do about it now?
Exactly.
That's usually the piece. Like, how do I integrate all this chaos so I can like live a day that doesn't suck? Let's start
Yeah.
there. And then
Yeah.
like if you want to go to the gym still, great. I can do that too. I can help you lift weights or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's very interesting that you're like a similar but different path in terms of history, and even like business is a piece, but like what's the big picture?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and where's the chaos come from to begin with?
Yeah, and that's like one of the things that had me shift from like I was doing fitness and nutrition, and I was working with a lot of people that struggle with like binge eating disorder. And so they were coming to me to like get healthy, but also get help with like their eating disorder. And what I realized is like whether it was eating disorder or not, people would come to me, and if like the workout plan or like the nutrition, not that it wasn't working, but like they weren't implementing it, instead of just trying to like give them a different plan or do different things, it was like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's figure out, why is it not working?
Right.
Why are you not following this plan? You have all the tools. Why is it not working? And by asking that question instead of just trying to solve the problem, that's what really has like led me to really what I do now, because the what doesn't really matter. It's like why is it not working for you? Like what
Yeah.
is it? You know?
Well, and interesting that how is where my mind goes, but one of the things I want to focus on with this podcast, like in general, practical honesty, right? It's how do you fit it all into a day that doesn't suck, right? It's how do people put it into practice? Like, it's great to say, here's the things you should do, and here's the things that work for lots of people.
Mhm.
It's all very ethereal. It's like, well, what the fuck do you do in your day?
Yeah.
Like, do you practice what you preach? Do you walk the talk, right? And so I'm curious, like, in your current areas of focus, could you talk a bit about how you've been able to prioritize them and make actual progress yourself
In like the work that I do.
in your work or in your personal life too, right? Because you've had some major transitions, which is kind of the next piece I want to talk about is
Yeah.
life transitions and things.
Yeah. I would say, and like, of course, I would say most of the work that people do, whether you're a coach or a personal trainer or whatever, are like the work you do in business is also going to be the work you're doing, in your personal life, essentially. And so I would say for me, one of the big things that people come to me for, there's kind of like two pieces, but the one piece is like habits, discipline, consistency, routines. Like I'm a very, very disciplined, like routine person. And so for me, the other piece of it is that I teach a lot about what I call imperfect consistency. I work with a lot of perfectionists. I would say 95% of my clients are perfectionists, workaholics. And one of the things that holds most people back is like they're constantly trying to make everything perfect or they have this all or nothing thinking. And so this might seem a little bit backwards, but I do walk the walk. Like I'm routined, I'm habitual, I'm disciplined. I do a lot of the things that I share with my clients, like, setting time or setting like reminders that go off when you're in the beginning stages of learning how to do something. And most people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. Or I set the alarm and it goes off and I ignore it. I'm like, yeah, well, now you've created a habit that you ignore it. And so I do a lot of these things. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I do. It's the fact that I'm okay with it not being perfect. And so even though I'm the habit, routine, discipline queen, I think a lot of people might look at what I do if they don't follow me and or they're new to following me and think that like I'm just regimented as hell. And I am, but I also am very imperfectly consistent with it. But it's because I don't beat myself up. People who try to get better with fitness and nutrition or their habits or whatever, the reason why they're not sticking with it is because they think in order to be like me or to be like someone who's very consistent, they have to do it every day. And the moment they have, 8 days where they do it and on the ninth day they don't, then they're like, oh, I guess it's not for me and I suck at it. And it's like, no, I literally just did the same thing, but I don't beat myself up about it. And I just move on the next day as if it didn't happen. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing because I could talk about individual things, but for me, it's everything that I practice, everything that I teach, whether it's journaling, meditating, changing your mindset, perspective shifts, whatever. All of it is very much like I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it perfectly. And that's the reason why I say it's not about it's more about the consistency of progress or consistency of process versus perfection of the process.
Mm.
And so that's really where it's at. And I would say that's like why I'm good at what I do because I just fuck up and then it's okay. Like I'm not perfect at it.
It's a
If
lot
that
of
makes
work and acceptance, whether
Yeah.
with yourself or the client. It's like, here we are, right? And either way, my mind goes to indecision doesn't get shit done. So
Yes.
it's like at
That's
the
a
end of the day, you either do nothing or you just pick something and fucking go.
Yeah.
And whether it's perfect or imperfect, that's less important than just the fact of you're creating the habit to do something. Try it out, be curious, and then open to accept whatever the outcome is, whether it's the one you want or not.
Yeah. I think the whole idea, the thing that happens a lot, because again, this idea of indecision is a big one in terms of my clients with like ADHD and whatnot, is like people, I do this all the time with my clients. They get mad at me, and then they realize that, and not that I'm right, like I need to be right, but like I'm calling them out on the shit that they need to be called out on. But we'll have a problem. And so we'll like talk about things, we'll figure out solutions, whatever. And then they'll come to me not doing the thing. And then it's like, okay, well, why? And then when they're giving me answers, I'm like, all of this is just you stalling. It's just stalling. None of it's real. It's just you finding something that's another reason why you can't do the thing. There's a reason why there's indecision. It's not that you don't know what option to choose or one option is going to be right or wrong. It's that there's some other fear over here, fear
Yeah.
of failure, fear of success, perfectionism, whatever, that you're not facing. So you're using the fact that like your dog's sick or that, you have this wrong or you don't have time. It's no. All of that is just you stalling. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's really my opinion on that.
Well, it's either excuses or reasons. And to my mind, it's the
Mhm.
intention behind them that matters, right? It's the
Yeah.
distinguishing factor between the two. Because a lot of the times, excuses can also be shifted into being reasons. But the difference is now you're deciding that you're actually going to not let them stop you. Otherwise, it just continues to be an excuse. Why didn't you do it? Well, my dog's sick. Great. Now what? And if you're
Yeah.
like, well, my dog's sick, it's like, okay, well, now it's an excuse because like, what the fuck does that mean? It means you don't want to do it right now. Which,
Yeah.
okay, but now maybe we have a reassessment period versus this, why do I never progress? Well, it's because you never want to move forward.
Mhm.
Imagine.
Yeah. I agree
Yeah.
100%.
Do you find generally the label of ADHD is more a benefit or a hindrance in terms of like helping people navigate the world?
My last podcast episode was literally about this and I
Okay.
started the podcast by saying one of the things I hear from a lot of people, because I have a lot of people that come into my DMs who are like over the age of 40 and they're getting like a late diagnosis, or people who we've talked about some struggles, and what they're telling me, I obviously I'm not diagnosing anybody, but I'll ask them like, "Oh, do you have like what you're telling me kind of sounds like ADHD. Do you have ADHD? Have you ever got a diagnosis, whatever?" And I'm like, "You don't have to have it, but just curious." And a lot of times I'll hear people say, "Well, I don't want to like get the diagnosis, or I don't, or I have it, but I don't say that I do because I don't want to label myself and like let it be like a crutch." And to me, I'm just like, absolutely not, because a few reasons. One, that's like if you thought you had diabetes and you were like, I'm not going to get a diagnosis. So then you don't know anything about how to handle it. I know it's a little bit extreme, but ADHD is something that you want to become a student of. You don't have to let it be a crutch. You can get the diagnosis and then let it be a crutch, or you can get a diagnosis and become a student of it. Because the way, if you look, there's plenty of studies that show if you look at the brain of someone with ADHD and look at the brain of like a traumatic brain injury survivor, a stroke, whatever, the certain spots in their brain that aren't where the lights aren't on look the same.
Mm.
So this isn't just some like made up thing. So to me, the idea of it being like a label, people can 100% use it in that way,
Yeah.
but that's more of a choice. The other reason why I don't like that whole idea of like, oh, I don't want to label myself, or I, whatever, is because ADHD that's making it seem like ADHD is all bad. ADHD is an incredible superpower. We are creative, we are the entrepreneurs, we are there's so many benefits to having ADHD. And when you can become a student of it, and then you can, I don't want to say control it, but you can have it handled a bit better, then
Yeah.
you're able to use the superpowers, which is like hyper focus. Like I said this in the podcast, but if you take somebody with a normal brain, and then where it's not broken, it's just different, and then somebody with an ADHD brain, and someone who can control as much as they can their hyper focus, their ability to like laser in, we will beat the normal brain any day. I'll take that, like,
100%.
by a mile. So it's like, yes, people can definitely have it be a hindrance, let it be a crutch, but that is a choice. But the ADHD label itself is not that. It's the choice to say, I'm just going to have it be a thing. And then, oh, I'm just silly, I have ADHD, or I'm going to become a student of
Yeah.
it. Makes
Well,
sense.
and then it's like, well, why are you not progressing in your business, or why can't you seem to make changes in your life last, towards a positive or more vibrant future? It's like, well, I got ADHD. Like, okay. And and honestly, identity is one of the biggest things I like about this podcast is I can ask people about what do they associate with themselves
Mhm.
in terms of who are you and whatever. And then to bring this into the next question I wanted to ask anyways is about divorce. Because
Mhm.
it's like a lot of times people tie that into, well, now I'm unlovable and I'm broken and all these things. And it's just like maybe in the moment or in like a span of time, you have healing to do and all that stuff, right? But at the end of the day, like how long do you attach that to yourself and just prevent yourself from living the life you want to live? And so it's like divorce in today's world, it still has, at least in my perspective, like a bit of a negative tone, right? This
Mhm.
kind of oh, I'm divorced, and people are like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
and so I guess what I'm asking is, what did you find was most difficult to navigate through your divorce?
So something that you just said, I want to mention too.
Yeah,
is It's only happened like once or twice, and every time it's happened, I'm like, oh, this is great. When I've told people I've gotten a divorce, and now I've just gotten to the point where like my sentence doesn't end at that. If like it comes up in
right.
conversation, I will say, I got a divorce, but please don't give me any pity. It's great. I'm the happiest I've ever been,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
me and my ex are happy. But instead of people saying I'm sorry, some people will say, "Oh, congrats." And I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, I love that." Like when
Uh-huh.
people like cuz there's something I heard when I was getting my divorce where someone said, "I'm there's never been a good marriage that's ended in divorce." So it's like when people are like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I've had a few people be like, "Congrats," and like immediately and I'm like, "That's so awesome." So I love
Yeah.
that.
Do you know
Um
if they were divorced people themselves?
um, I think probably more people
Yeah.
that said it have been, but there's a few people that I'm not sure. They may have just
Nice.
said that.
Yeah.
But yeah, navigating my divorce, I think the biggest thing to kind of touch on one thing that I think is important to mention when answering this question is like getting to the point of the finally saying, okay, we're getting a divorce.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people ask me that when in the DMs or whenever I talk about it, they're like, "How did you know you were ready to get the divorce?" And there
Yeah.
wasn't like one single thing. It was the accumulation of the same issue not being resolved and certain resentments on both of our ends. Like it wasn't just him, it wasn't just me. But these things that kept happening that like it kind of was I really think it had to be like I felt ready because there were so many things I heard over and over and over again and I still didn't make the choice. And I think that the other thing that helped me that I really think can help most people is really exhausting every single option you have. Like couples therapy, both of you going to therapy. Just for and not everybody needs to do that, but for me, I wanted to know if we did make the decision that I couldn't say there was anything else we could have done because that's where I would have like been like, oh no, like should we've done this? You know what I mean? So I think like there was so much already like grieving that was going on in that process because I asked for a divorce and we had talked about it a bunch, but I had asked for a divorce officially in January of 2023. Yeah, I don't even know what years.
Hmm.
2023. And then we tried to make it work one more time which was we'd already tried 17,000 times, but who knows, maybe one time was going to
Yeah.
be the time that worked. And so then in May or like April or May was when we said okay and we like started the process. And so even before January I'd been thinking about it. And so I think what really helped me navigate it was honestly the processing, the grieving, the thinking, the all of the things that happened before I asked for it. That way, when I did ask for it, there was no question in my mind of like, should like, of course, that still
Yeah.
happened of like, okay, now this is real. Oh my God. But I think I had really put my all my effort into like trying to make it work. And then the fact that it didn't, I really felt like, okay, I can do this. And another thing that really helped me and this helped me make the decision, this helped me move through getting the divorce was trying to think of exactly how I like worded it. So I can be a little bit like, spiritual woo woo. I'm like kind of in the middle. I'm very centrist in everything that I do politically, all the things. I'm not like too woo woo, but I'm also not too scientific. And
Yeah.
so, but I do like to get a little spiritual with it. And so I realized God, the universe, whatever you believe in, like if I keep allowing something in my life that is not serving me, and I'm just like, keep letting it happen and keep letting it happen, I'm basically telling the universe, God, whoever you believe in, like, hey, this thing that I keep being okay with is awesome. Give me more of that. And so I realized that it was affecting my business, it was affecting my health. And I was like, if I want there to be change, I'm gonna have to put out this energy of like, I no longer want to put up with this. I want
Yeah.
more of a different experience. And so that was kind of what happened. And that was really like a North Star for me as I continued to move through it when things got more real. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're losing, I'm because I've known him for 20 years. He was like a best friend before we dated. And so I just realized that like I don't want to settle. I want what I want. And I want to tell like the universe that I want more of this. And so I think for me, that was like my biggest North Star. And of course, I had support from friends. I did a lot of like inner work and therapy and all of those things. But it was just a consistent reminder of like, I can have what I want.
Right.
And as soon as we got the divorce, like that day, I signed like two clients. I had like this local place reach out to me saying they wanted me to do some kind of seminar. I had so many amazing things happen. And it was just like a reminder, okay, This
Yeah.
is exactly what I thought was going to happen. And the same thing for my ex. You know, he's doing great too. I feel like we both had a glow up. We're still friends. And I think that's a piece that a lot of our friends or people who we interacted with, because we lived together for like another 6 months after we were going through the divorce, and everybody who we interacted with, our friends or anybody else, they'd be like, "You guys are like the most amicable divorced couple I've ever seen." And we're like, "Well, why does it have to be nasty? Divorce doesn't have to be nasty. Like, if you want to be nasty to each other, you can, but like nothing in our divorce was ever nasty ever." And I think that that is why I like to talk about my journey with it, because I think it helps people who are thinking about it be like, "Oh, wait, it can be not awful." You
Yeah.
know, people think it has to be this thing where you're throwing stuff and you can't even be in the same room as each other. Of course, there's going to be some people like that, but
Right.
I don't want to be that way.
Well, and what I found, it costs literally the same amount of money for me to get married and divorced. It was $500 to get married. It was $500 to get divorced. And like, it can be pretty simple,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
was a
I
surprise to
found
me.
the money piece is a little bit different. Ours, I mean, ours probably cost a similar amount. Our wedding was super expensive, but
Sure.
it's much easier to get married than it is to get a divorce. Like just the process of it, like the paperwork, like it's
Totally.
still doable. It's not like you have to figure anything out. It's just like, why is it easier to get married than it is to get a divorce? That
Yeah.
part blew my mind, but
Well, that's a whole different stream of,
yeah.
anyways, we won't get into that, but who knows?
Yeah.
What's what's been one of your biggest lessons to yourself or from yourself since getting divorced? I find a lot of times like we change, as you said, you've had a glow up, both of you, but what's been one of like looking back, something that you would say like, fuck, I never would have learned that, or I'm so happy that I did learn that, would maybe be a better question.
Oh my gosh, a million things.
Yeah.
I think two things really stand out. One is kind of what I was just talking about, like this, like not settling. Like, and this isn't any shade to my ex. I love him. I appreciate him. It was just like, and there he probably feels the same way about me. There were just certain things that I wasn't getting in the relationship that I wanted. And like we broke up 2 years into our relationship and then got back together and we're together for another 7 years. And for that entire 7 years, nothing really changed. Like we grew as people and whatnot, but the things I wasn't getting, I didn't get for 7 years on and off, but like didn't get those things. And so for me, I think it made me realize that like it's okay to have certain standards and know that like the whole like you can compromise essentially, but like I never want to settle again, even if it means like my standards are super high now.
Sure.
And so I know that the dating pool, I'm not dating now, but when I get back into dating, the dating pool I know is probably going to leave me with like a very small percentage. And I've like told some friends I tell that and they're like, yes, who cares? Do it. And there are other friends where I'm like, because I don't want kids. And some friends
Right.
are like, well, are you sure? Like, what if they have kids or you? And I'm like, no. And they're like, but that kind of is going to limit the dating pool for you. I'm like, I don't care.
And
Like
all it
it
takes is
doesn't.
one.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a 7 billion people in the world. Like I'm gonna find one. You know what I mean? So that's a big
Yeah.
one. And then the other one, and I think I would have maybe learned this lesson in a different way, but I think that I've been noticing since the divorce and different interactions, whether it be in my business with like other people I've interacted with since then, has been to really trust my gut, trust my instinct. Anything that I ever felt like, and again, I had to be ready to leave the relationship, but anything that I felt when I look back at it, I was like, I was right. I was
Yeah.
right. I was right.
Yeah.
And like if I look at anything that's happened since then, again in any area, I will like room. I also have like diagnosed OCD. So in my OCD, everybody has like different compulsions. My compulsion is like rumination and overthinking. I can literally take a thought and chew it in my brain until it's applesauce for like 3 weeks straight. And so it's honestly been helping my OCD because instead of like sitting with this thought for so long, I'm like, wait, what did we say? We can trust
Yeah.
ourselves. And when I do, because I'm reminding myself, even if I go to trust myself and for some reason it is wrong, that doesn't mean I can't trust myself. It just happens to be that scenario. But more times than not, I'm right. And if 8 out of 10 times I'm right, I think that's a pretty good percentage. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
well, it's a process of self-validation, really, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, for
Right? You're
sure.
able to listen to yourself and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, I know that's true because look at all these examples of the truth in the
Yeah.
past where it absolutely was correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Way more times than not, which is what I keep reminding myself of. Like it's okay to be wrong. It's you're not going to predict everything, but
100%. Well, and people are one of the things I like to say is people do people things. So like to a certain degree of predictability, you'll be able to know what they're going to do. But there's always going to be that like, well, fuck, didn't see that coming. Well,
Yeah.
people do crazy shit sometimes. Like, well, that's true, right? What
Yeah.
are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
It's
That
something
was
else.
I got into a situationship after the divorce, and it only lasted for like 3 months. It wasn't ever going to be anything anyway, but that was one of those situations where like this person, like my friends loved him, my therapist loved him, and he did one of those things where it's like, never saw that coming. And
Yeah,
so that was I looked at it as like I could either let this be a situation, because at first when it happened I was like, how, if someone who I thought I could trust did this, how in the
no,
world am I ever going to notice any, because there was no red, now looking back I could see the red flags, but there really weren't any red flags that I could see in the moment. Or I could look at it as, wow, now have a huge chunk of like evidence and data to know how to see through some bullshit, and now I have new perspective, and that's kind of like
absolutely.
the way that I'm looking at it.
Yeah. It's something that I try to remind myself in the dating pool now, even too, is people will treat you however you let them. And
Yes.
like it's well on boundaries and whatever, right? But that's just like, why did that happen? It's a very quick answer in my mind of like, how did that situation unfold? Well, I definitely facilitated it to at least some or a moderate degree, if not to a large degree. And
Mhm.
so, how do I sort of navigate myself forward to not do that again? It's that
Yeah.
self-validation, trusting the intuition, and like I fucking knew it. Even with my second marriage, when she asked me, "Do you sure you want to get married?" and my gut said, "Not a fucking chance," right away. And I was like, "Yeah, of course I am." Like
Yeah.
out of my mouth, and I was like, "Where did that come from?" And I sat on it for a bit, and I just kind of blew it away. But like from the moment, this is a bad idea. But I was
Yeah.
like, "Fuck it, I'll just go for the ride," and it was definitely a
Yeah.
ride, you know. But
Yeah.
so to kind of change pace a little bit, boy sober. What's the situation with that? I've noticed, or what have you noticed within yourself since being boy sober?
Yeah, so that's interesting. This is actually something I want to talk about my podcast, because like some things have changed.
Mm,
They're still the same, but different. So Boy Sober, to give you like a little bit of a background, and for anybody who's like, what the fuck is Boy Sober? Boy Sober was just, I had my divorce, then I got into this situationship, and then I had like a friends with benefits thing that was, we knew wasn't going anywhere, but I started to get like, I never wanted to date this person, but started to get like, why aren't you texting me as much? And I was like very needy, rejection wound, abandonment wound, anxious attachment, like all of it was coming forward. And that was a moment where I was like, okay, I can't even do friends with benefits. I need some time, which like I knew, but like I needed to get there. And so, when you're in a relationship for almost a decade, like, I was bound to, want to have interactions, right? But so that was when I realized, okay, I just need some time away from interactions with people. And so I 100% was no dating, no dating apps, none of that. Didn't want to like talk to anybody, like be texting someone, calling someone consistently. And then when it first started, it was like no like hookups or anything like that. So I did that for a little bit. And then what I realized through chatting with some friends and doing my own work, because I'm doing a lot of work with this, like a lot of work around my abandonment wounds, rejection. And I think a lot of like my abandonment and rejection comes from one, my dad's like absent but present. So he's always there for me, still have a relationship with him, but we talk like 5 times a year maybe. I go home and I see him, and it's just like, it just feels very superficial, and I love him, but that's just kind of like the way it is. And then from second grade to about sophomore year of high school, I was bullied, like really badly bullied, and like physically bullied, like emotionally bullied. And so I realized through a lot of this work, and not that I didn't know this, but I didn't know how bad my rejection wound was. And then in my relationship, my marriage, there were certain things that like essentially made me feel rejected. My ex was never a bad person, but there was things I wanted, didn't get, that made me feel rejected. So there's a lot of that I realized. And so what I realize, and everybody's, can do this kind of thing differently, but I realized that if I stay too much in my own space, I don't have any interactions, I don't go out, I still don't want to date. I'm not doing that anytime soon, but, or who knows, but like
yeah,
not purposely going out there and doing that. I'm always open for who knows, maybe I bump into somebody at the grocery store and it's true love, but like I'm not outwardly going out for that, right?
yep,
And so I realized that if I kind of like immersion therapy, and I do this with like OCD and stuff like that, if I want to really get past the fear of rejection, me closing myself off and not having any interactions means I'm safe. And so
Yeah.
I realize I actually do need to go for rejection. And I still don't want to do, because I'm still going to have to practice that in the terms of dating. But in terms of if I'm out like at a bar with a friend and there's a cute guy, like, and I typically am the kind of person that would go up to someone, but like doing that, or if there's someone who I want to hang out with, like asking them to hang out and like,
Mhm.
because usually I'm like, well, what if they say no? And that's, I was talking to a friend and they were like, you need to throw yourself into it. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what I've been doing recently. So there's been a little bit more interactions essentially, but
Sure.
I've been putting myself in those situations and I have been rejected. And what I've been realizing, I was just talking to a friend this morning, I was like, I realize even though it hasn't been going on for that long, I don't think everything that you work on has to take years, right? I was like, I already feel like I'm growing thick skin with the rejection because it's happening. I'm
Yep.
not dying. I know that it doesn't have anything to do with me. And even if it did, it's just that person's preference of me. And then
Yeah.
I can move on. So that's kind of where that journey has taken me. I'm still very much, again, not outwardly going out to like date. I'm not being on dating apps or anything like that. But if I have interactions and things happen, I'm not like usually in my past, I would really be pursuing things. Like I would find someone and be like, this person's the love of my life. Like I bump
Yeah.
into someone
Right.
at the airport. I'm like, that's my anxious attachment. I'm like, we're supposed to be together and we're gonna
You're
get
it.
married. We're gonna be together forever. And so
Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
practicing liking someone and then being like, kind of not nonchalant about it, but like there's not this like drive to make it be something. And it's been very good practice for me because that's not usually how I've been. So it's been a lot of like learning that about myself. Another thing I'm doing is in the notepad section of my phone, I'm collecting these, I could just call it things I'm learning about myself. So anytime I have these interactions, I'm like, ooh, what does that mean? Why am I having that interaction? And I'm kind of writing it
Right.
down. I think I'm up to like 35 things, which
Nice.
might not sound like a lot, but like it's been really good. So yeah.
That's a long note.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, like in what you're saying, my perception of things in terms of rejection, like I feel like men have a lot more experience in rejection generally than women do,
Yeah, I could see that.
and especially within the dating context. And so, like, I don't know, I feel like I came to terms with rejection when I was like 14, you know.
Right.
I didn't have a girlfriend through half of high school, whatever, all that stuff. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's interesting. What's your perception of um say in your friend group or in your female friend group, is something like working with rejection wounds, is that a common thing amongst your female friends more than your male friends? Like it seems a lot more likely that men can go up to women in bars and they're like, get the fuck away from me.
Mhm.
And it's like sometimes it's a harsh like shut down, which I completely understand. Sometimes it has to be, and dudes can be fucking creepy. I get it too. But
Yeah.
like if you're not one of those dudes, you're like, hey, you know, something. It's like, get the fuck
Yeah.
away from me. Like, bam. All
Yeah.
right. You got to learn pretty quick that like that's not necessarily about you.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I've never necessarily had this conversation, but like there's already some things coming to mind when you're talking about it. So one, what you're saying about rejection. So I think, and this is a lot of just like the way men and women are, not to be like stereotypical, but there are just the way
There are
men
stereotypes.
they're stereotypes for a reason. And so it's not true for everybody, but if you look, so I was just talking to somebody about this and she studies something along these lines, but she says women peak their confidence by the age of 9 and men actually peak it like later on.
Sure.
Men typically, if you look at it, and like there's a lot of, I'm not going to say like specific studies, but things that
Yeah.
I've read about this stuff, where men just naturally are more confident than women
Mm,
just because of society and because like women are taught from a very young age to like play it safe, do this, do that, and men are taught to like go after it, be the boss, do those things. And so I think that men, not that they don't experience rejection because they do, but they don't experience it like they're probably experiencing it in terms of like, they go up to, if a girl goes up to a guy at a bar and he's probably going to be like, hey, what's up? Like, as long as
yeah.
he's somewhat attracted to her, he's like, hey,
Great.
but
This has
yeah,
never
so
happened
like,
before in my life.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think
Yeah.
that place is the place where it would be different. But if you think about women in the workplace or in
Totally.
school, like girls in middle school are way meaner to other girls in middle school than the guys are. Like, oh, little boys just get along with each other. And so I think women experience rejection in those kinds of ways way more often than men do. And so I think that like even if like you're afraid of rejection in that sense, like a lot of the women that I talk to, again, just talking to a friend this morning where she was experiencing rejection just like in her women's circles and like
Mhm.
worrying about like as adults, like women not accepting her in certain areas, which is still so crazy to me. And so I do think that men probably are just used to rejection in terms of like walking up to girls and whatnot. But I think that men are naturally, because of society, because I don't know if you saw the Barbie movie, but it's like a man's
Oh,
world. I never
okay.
saw it. My sister was begging me to watch it. But it's like it's very much a man's world, and it has been for a really long time. And so I think men are just kind of naturally more, and it doesn't mean that internally they're not struggling with those things, but I haven't had those conversations. And I think men definitely like I've always thought about that, like what it's like to be a woman, and like it's easier a little bit to know that you could go up to somebody and they're probably going to talk to you versus a guy getting rejected. I'm never mean, but like I've definitely rejected guys before if I'm not interested. Like, I'm
Sure.
gonna that. So yeah, so I think those are kind of like my thoughts on it, if that makes sense.
My mind went to too what you're talking about, like in your friends groups and the girls being a lot meaner. It's that sort of very early age psychological altercation with females versus the more physical altercation of males. And
Mhm.
like men, not all the time, trust depending on the reason, but men can fight, still be friends, and still hang out in the same circles. Women,
Yes.
for the other hand, like, and this is my male bias, but it sure seems like if you're like, fucking Sonia is not part of our group anymore, and every single one of the women in the group is now going to go fucking tell her 1,000 times and remind her super quietly, though, and pretty subtly, but she's going to know you're not welcome and you are now no longer part of us. And so there's this sort of like community based. You're like, you need to find a different piece, which ties into identity in my mind too, where it's
Yeah.
like now, well, who do I belong to? Like I have to find a different identity because my friend group just told me to fuck off. And that's
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
fucks you up big time, right? And that's the whole like women fight dirty with the mental game, and the men, not that we don't, but it's a
Yeah.
lot less I don't know, it's more overt, maybe
Yeah.
the male mental games.
Yeah, it's cutthroat. It really is. And that's something I've
Yeah.
had this conversation with like I would have this conversation with my ex, and it's like I would hear him like if he's like playing, he would play Xbox, and like some of the arguments I'd hear him get in with his friends. I'm like, if I ever had that argument with a girl, I would never talk to her again. Ever in my whole life. And they're just saying these things and then they're best friends the next day. Like that
Yeah.
blows my mind. And like as an adult, like for me, like I was talking to a friend about this, like as long as you can communicate, like you don't need to have beef with your friends, like as long as you can communicate, that's fine. But there are definitely certain levels to like these things that women are just different, and I've always been so fascinated by that, the stuff that like men can say to each other and like get in an argument and then be friends. It can be very hard to be a woman and do that, and like it easily like fear that rejection. The other thing too that I think is a thing, and not that men don't experience it, but obviously women have experienced it way more, is women just have higher standards for like what they need to look like. And
Mm,
so I think that like if you don't look a certain way or you don't act a certain way or anything like that, that can also make you feel rejected. And so I just feel like there's a lot more boxes to tick for women to feel like to make sure that they're a part of whatever they need to be a part of,
right.
versus men can kind of just like, and not every situation, but can kind of just like show up and like you're cool, you're accepted, and
Well,
like
and
put it
usually
around.
for men, it seems like it's more skill based or usefulness. It's like, am I useful to the group or do they perceive me to have some sort of skill? And if so, what's up? It doesn't matter about the rest of shit. But for the women,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't give a fuck about your skills. You look weird. It's like, well, fuck, what do you do with that? Like, I can't just go learn about how to not look weird, right? Or if there's it's a lot more or different layers. I don't know that I would say more layers, but uh, yeah, it's just the whole culture of men and women, and that's one of the reasons this whole people do people things. I love social psychology and the interactions between people and like seeing situations and like I don't know, my mind just loves that shit too.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I'm going to take a hard left turn
Let's
and
do it.
ask, how would you describe your relationship with death?
So my whole life, I'm 33, my whole life up until maybe a year or two ago, I'm not in the best place, but I have been absolutely afraid of death. Afraid of getting old, afraid, and for all the reasons, whether it's looks or just like my organs failing, whatever, like afraid of getting old and afraid of death. And not afraid of death because like I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we don't know, right? But everybody has their beliefs. I believe that it's going to be awesome. Whether it's heaven or I'm flying around in the stars or I reincarnate as something, hopefully it's something cool. But like
Yeah.
I don't feel like it just ends. I feel like there's something. And maybe that's
Hmm.
just me holding on to something, but that's what I believe. And so but I'm more so afraid of death in terms of like it being painful, it being scary, even though
Mm.
all the stories I've ever heard is like, oh, they died peacefully and then somebody's ghost comes back and says that it was, fine, whatever, because I believe in ghosts. And so I'm more afraid of like that piece and like dying like early. I want to live
Mm.
till like I'm 120. And they said in the millennial age group that our lifespan is most likely going to be around 120, which is insane. That's what I've heard.
Right.
And so it's been always just been very scary for me. And I also my biggest fear with it is that even though it all really depends on what you believe, but I believe, we're all souls and whatever, and we come down and whatnot. I'm afraid that like the people that mean a lot to me, my friends, my parents, I'm afraid that like what if I die and I don't get to see them? Like they don't like
Mm. The
exist or something
closure.
like. Yeah, and I'm sure I'll be fine because it's a place where you're not sad, whatever, I don't know. And I'm just like afraid that like if I think about like not being able to see my dog's like soul spirit, like that's what makes me really sad. It's more of, I guess I'd say I'm more sad of it than scared. But with these, social media can be good, it can be bad. But with social media, I have followed or seen a lot of people who talk about death, talk about near death experiences, people who, again, depending on what you believe in, like, can speak to the dead and things like that. And even if it's all fake, it makes me feel better about
Mm.
that. It makes, as long as I can know that there is something after this and that I get to interact with the people, the souls, whoever that like mean a lot to me, that to me makes me feel better. So while I'm not necessarily excited to die,
Yeah.
I'm less fearful of it because I feel like this is 100% like not the end at all. And that's like the biggest thing for me. So
It's yeah, I mean that's awesome. I'm with you on the terms of like I don't think this is it. And at the end of the day, we'll never know until we get there anyways, right? So it is kind of strange how much time some people seem to spend on like what happens if after we die and whatever. It's like, well, what happens when you're alive?
yeah,
That's one thing. It's like, why don't we just focus on this and then being present and becoming the best version of ourselves for ourselves and the people around us and all that stuff. And that's like how I believe we have the ability to change the world, right? If
yeah,
we all work towards becoming the best versions of ourselves, the world would just be a better place.
yeah.
There'll be less shitty people doing shitty things. And that's like a net positive for everybody.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, I don't know if this, I mean, I'm sure there's no like right or wrong answer, but the other thing that I think about when I think, because I was kind of talking about my own death, but when I
Yeah.
think about the relationship I have with death in terms of just like now in this lifetime, people who I know dying, that is terrifying for me because
Yeah.
I have never, besides once experienced death close to me at all. Like I've
Yeah.
known people, but I've been very fortunate. Any of my grandparents, they're all alive. And any of them, like great grandparents, they died when I was like really young, don't really remember. Like my mom's mom, she died when I was 6. So like I was so young, I didn't really, not that it wasn't sad for me, but like I didn't really understand the concept of it. I literally went to a summer camp that was like for kids who have experienced death, and we like had a great time. It
Right.
was, I don't remember it being sad. The only person that I've ever had close to me that died was my uncle, who was kind of like a brother to me.
Right.
And he committed suicide, and that was like the worst thing. I was like, I don't know how I'm ever gonna survive this. My dog dying, I've already looked up if you can find a therapist that specializes in dog grief because I think I'm going to become severely depressed when he
Sure.
dies. I don't know how I'm going to function. So for me, having my parents, my grandparents, all of my family, everyone is good to go. My one grandfather, he's really not doing the best. I don't know how long he has, but like it is so terrifying for me to think about losing someone because I just haven't experienced it that much. I mean, I experienced it in
Yeah.
one of the most traumatic ways, but like that is the part that like I don't I'm such an emotional person. I feel emotions at the highest extent. I'm very joyful, I'm very happy, but it also means on the other end of that spectrum, when I feel sadness, I am an absolute wreck.
Right.
So that's terrifying for me.
I'm very much in not the opposite, but I describe myself generally in this monotone emotional state of like I know with my health and all these things, like I cannot live being in a state of chronic depression because I will just literally die. I
Yeah.
need to do the things day to day to keep alive.
Yeah.
And so as a byproduct of that, that's one thing I've been working on for a while now is how do I access these higher state emotions without, and not that I'm a sad person generally speaking, but
Yeah.
like that's what I've noticed. One of my protective mechanisms is that I know I need to function all day, every day, or most of the day, every day.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'm dead. And like cutting off those high end joys and things like that, it seems like a great place to be. I just haven't figured out how to get there yet. And that's one of the reasons I started with mushrooms. It's like maybe I don't think I've ever accessed those circuits in my brain. And
Yeah.
so maybe I don't know how to get there. So let's take some psilocybin to see if I can create some neuroplasticity and get there myself, you
Yeah.
know? But that's literally the path I'm on right now.
Yeah. And that is, and I don't know if this is like a solidified thing or a personal preference or personal opinion, but like from what I've heard and my own experience, I forget exactly what the quote is, but you can only ever experience as much joy as you can pain. And
Yeah.
so there's no like, oh, I'm the kind of person that is can feel all the happiness and I'm going to get up here. If you feel that, you're gonna feel like the other way. So I'm like my emotional spectrum is insane. Like that's what most people like I feel like recognize about me. I've heard so many times in my life like you're just a very expressive person or you wear
Mm,
your emotions on your sleeve. Like there's no hiding it with me. You're going to know exactly how I feel and I won't hide it. But it's a double-edged sword for sure because I while I can feel like the littlest things will make me so happy, but the littlest things will also make me extremely sad. So
sure.
it's an interesting place to be, but I wouldn't change it for the world because even though the sad sucks when I feel that way, the joy and feeling that to the levels of that I can, like I'll take that. I'll take that if it means I
Yeah.
have to feel pain in the same way, even if it sucks.
Elation. That's where my mind goes is elation. You have the ability to get to that like super high frequency state of like, this is fucking sick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
which
don't
in
have that one so
contrast, yeah,
often.
like I'm talking to a woman next week about child loss, and anyways, that's going to be a different kind of conversation, I think. But that's something else that I feel, especially as a male, isn't talked about. Like mostly the men just don't. So
Yeah.
grief, grief is definitely its own thing. It's a different, but anyways, yeah, it's
Yeah.
as you're saying that pain does also allow you to access the pleasures, or
Yeah, the
not,
pendulum can only swing
yeah,
so far. As far as it goes one way, it can swing the other way. So,
yeah. To shift down to that, where would you say your drive to facilitate lasting change with people comes from?
this is a good question. I would say for me, I love like helping people and watching those like light bulb moments where things just like click for them. And so for me, it's a little bit of wanting to know that like I've left an impact or a legacy and knowing that not in a selfish like ooh I'm someone that changed someone's life but just knowing that I had a piece to play in that, less of like oh it was me and more of just like it kickstarted it was a catalyst, it was something that got it
Yeah,
moving. And just like watching people change. Like I have had over the years, whether it was been like weight loss or it's been a mindset shift, just there's like two people there. I've helped a bunch of people, but there's two people that are like coming to mind right now. There's this one woman that was a teacher. She had absolutely no business and she wanted to like start coaching people. So like long story short, she was literally she had done anything with coaching, but she went from being a teacher and now she's like coaching people, she's speaking, she's like doing all this stuff and like the trajectory of that, like she quit her job, she did all those things just like so
Yeah.
mind-blowing to me. And like that will and it's something that like I can never finish accomplishing. Like I can help person to person, but there's always going to be someone else that needs it. And I know I've made my life better. And like I could just like, I would there's still a lot I want to do, but I could die today and feel pretty good about myself. And so like if I can just continue to do that and I get messages from somebody like, you helped me 3 years ago and this is what my life looks like that is like the coolest thing for me. Even just having like a small part in somebody's life, like that will always drive me forever and ever and ever until I die.
It's that the whole thing about a rising tide raises all ships or whatever, floats all boats. I forget the end of the fucking thing, but
Yeah.
it's, when the individuals of a community thrive, the community thrives. You are an individual in a community, and so let's get the fucking community thriving, right? It's
Yeah.
like we
Like
all
we were
win.
talking about the being an amplifier in the beginning. Like
Yeah,
I love that. I think it's so rad.
yeah. So which it actually is a great segue to my next thought, which is probably
Hold on,
already
my
answered, but
audio is messed up. I can't hear you. 1 second. I don't know what happened. Oh, here we go.
Gigantic.
Okay, cool. I figured it. Sorry.
Nah, it's all good. Podcast stuff happens. Um, I believe we all have natural gifts to bring to the world. What would you say are some of yours? You mentioned the amplifier sort of phrasing. Is there
Mhm.
anything else that comes to mind? And then as a follow-up, how have you been able to integrate those gifts into your day-to-day life?
So one of the questions I get when people are interested in working with me, like in a one-on-one container, not everybody asks, but a lot of people will ask, like, what makes you different than other coaches? And my answer is always like, I feel like I was put on this earth or I have this superpower essentially to ask people questions that they've either never been asked before or asked in a way that they haven't been asked before. And like I've worked with people. I've been doing this for 11 years. It'll be 11 years in March. And I will chat with people and we'll have like one call and they're like, I've been in therapy for 8 years and my therapist has never asked me that before. And it's like the simplest thing.
Mhm.
Or they'll be like, I feel like I made more progress in the past 90 minutes than I've made with my therapist in 5 years. And this isn't any shade to them, it's just like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm good at. And I feel like I have a really good like bullshit meter. And so I work with a lot of tough clients because I was that person where they're like nobody could ever really crack them. They're able to kind of like the people who are able to just tell their therapist what they know the therapist wants to hear so they don't
Oh yeah.
really cry. You can't do that with me. You can't. Maybe
Yeah.
it won't happen in the first call, but like I'm going to not like break you down, but I'm going to like see through the bullshit and I'm going to ask you things and just ask them in a way that you're like, oh, well, shit. And then that question opens up a floodgate of other things because you're like, well, I never even thought to ask myself that. Now that you asked me that, holy shit, now I have so many other things to think about. So I
Yeah.
think that is really, I love people. I love people. I love studying people. I love people watching. I love like, and I try to find the healthy balance. I don't want to psychoanalyze every single person I interact with, but I like to just like, I'd love to know why people do what they do, why people,
Yeah.
so I feel like because I've loved that my whole life, it's made me really good at what I do.
No, it's funny. Like we've never really talked for any length of time before this, but we do have a lot of similarities. That's exactly like what you're saying is what drives me, and even the terminology, the light bulb moments.
Yeah.
That's what I got into years ago. That's why I got into it too. It's like if I can help facilitate people with light bulb moments in
Yeah.
whatever avenue of life, just more of that because it gives me energy. It makes me get excited. And I just get this like, fuck yeah. Like we're all just fucking doing it down here. Let's
Yeah.
fucking go. And that amps me up. I'm like, great, I'm way less tired now. Now I'm having a way better day.
Yeah.
Everybody involved wins. Let's fucking just keep that going.
Yeah.
Um, for the listeners, it'd be great if you could share some of the most common advice you found yourself giving lately, whether to clients or friends.
Hmm.
I
Advice
guess
I've
as a more specific question, where do people in your sphere seem to be stuck these past couple of weeks?
hmm. Honestly, and this is a way my brain has been going for quite a while. And I love my mentors. They've helped me a bunch, but they have all of them in the past 3 years, because I've been bringing this up consistently the past few years, have been telling me that this won't sell. I'm gonna tell you what it is, but they've been telling me that this won't sell, and I've been like, I feel like it will, because they're like, people buy what they think they need, not what you think they need, blah blah blah. But I think a lot of people are waking up to this realization that we are in this world where it's information overload. There are a million podcasts and books, and all of them are great, but like people are consuming and not implementing. And I
100%.
think if people like took this year off and they didn't like read one book, listen to one podcast, and there's not anything wrong with podcasts. You have a podcast, I have a podcast, they're great. But like if they didn't consume anything for the rest of the year and all they did was just implement whatever they've learned in the past few years, they would be solid for probably a year, two, three, four, five, maybe.
Yeah,
And so what I have been wanting to sell essentially, and I've already been doing, I have like my Tough Love Collective, which is a big element of this, is accountability. I think that people do not need to know what they need to do in their business, what they need to do in their life. They already know. They need accountability long enough so it sticks. And this is really what I teach. I've been teaching this for forever. I have something that I've coined as the PPC timeline. It's puberty plateau coast. And so the puberty stage is what I call like the beginning stages of a new habit, a new perspective, a new anything. And it's the puberty stage because it's hard, it's awkward, you don't feel like it, it's not second nature. And I would say it lasts about a month or so, shorter, longer, depending on the person. And you just don't feel like doing it. And in this puberty stage, this is where you need the most accountability. You need people helping, you need sticky notes, you need alarms, you need all of the things to get you over that hump. And most people just stay in the puberty stage because they try to implement a habit, but they're like, oh, like they try to stop hitting the snooze button. They do it for 3 days. And then on the fourth day, they're just like, I just don't feel like it. And they think it's not for them. And I'm like, no, this is just going to fucking suck during this time period. And so then the plateau stage is where it's kind of like, think about it, an analogy of like working out at the gym in the beginning. When you don't have a routine and you're in the puberty stage, you don't really feel like it, and you can't really it's not a part of your routine, but then you finally get into it, and then like the results you get are pretty decent in the beginning of your journey because you haven't been going. But then when you get to the plateau stage, because it's your body's starting to adjust, you're still making progress, but it can feel like a plateau because it's not the same as the beginning. So then that lasts for maybe another 2 or 3 months, and then you get to the coast stage where this is just the person that you are. And so with all of that said, I feel like most people right now are stuck in this puberty stage, maybe a little bit of a plateau stage. And so what I'm noticing, and this has been so, because I do a lot of like market research calls and I ask people, what are you struggling with? Common question with so many people is, I know what I need to do, I just need to do it. And so a lot of it is just like the accountability. And then there's elements to like what you need to do to like make sure that you're doing it. But I would say like that's the biggest thing I'm really realizing right now, whether it's somebody on the internal side of their journey with like limiting belief stories, whatever. Like they
Mhm.
need to just do the fucking work. They've been doing enough therapy things. They've done it, but they're not doing the inner work. They're not doing shadow work, journaling, meditating, whatever they need to do for them. They're not doing it. And then they're wondering why they still struggle with it. Because this limiting belief that you haven't worked through is still holding you back. That's why.
Yeah.
You're not going to just become aware of a limiting belief and then change it, right? And so, or it's the logistical side of things. Like for somebody's business, they know they need to be more consistent on social media, but they're not doing it. And so the other piece of the work that I do is helping them figure out why they're not doing it. But then a lot of it is also just the doing of it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is people knowing what they need to do, but they're not doing
And that's again just more like
it.
parallels. My solution to this right now, I've been learning NLP for the last while now, but that's like, how do I help people address this inner resistance to making progress in whatever they want to make progress in? And that's my question, or my answer to the question of how. was NLP. And so, well, I'm starting that literally this week. I'm starting
Mhm.
with friends. Like I'm doing practice sessions I'm already in, but like I want to help people have less inner resistance so that, well, even the community group I started in my local town, a monthly meetup for accountability. I started it in January, but it's the exact same thing. It's like, I don't want you to be stuck in the same place at the same problems 6 months from now. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen. All
Mhm.
you have to do is show up and just keep taking steps and fucking try.
Mhm.
I guarantee you, you won't be in the same place.
Yeah.
But because I've done it, I've been there. I'm like, fuck, nothing's really changed. That sucks. Time passed anyway. Well, how do I keep other people from experiencing this?
Yeah.
So, but it's, yeah, I love, it's awesome. And it's so exciting to be part of the process. And
Yeah.
like, I will combat your mentors and say, I do think that will sell
Yeah.
because it's also what I perceive people to need right now.
Yeah. I think a lot of
It's
people are realizing that. And that's what I've always known. And I think there are like there are going to be the people who are like, no, I really just need you to tell me what to do. Which is fine. And of course, there's always going to be logistics. Like people are still
for
going to
sure.
need to know those things. But I think a lot of people are realizing like, you know what? I actually do know what I need to do. I just need to do it. So then it's like navigating that like resistance. And then a lot of it is just like, and it's like the hardest thing. And but that's why I like you're talking about NLP. Like one of my things is getting, and I've been studying somatics for on my own for a bit, but I want to like get like a little bit deeper into it and get like a certification and whatnot, because there's so much stuff that it's just our body. We're so in our minds constantly and just like
100%.
trying to think our way out of situations. And I'm just like, if you have anxiety, if you like, one of the things that totally changed my relationship with anxiety, like I feel like I don't like I don't want to say I don't have it, but like I can start to have anxiety and then literally just go, okay, where do I feel in my body? Okay, I'm just gonna like be with it. And then like it just goes away. And
Mhm.
it's like the wildest thing when you like learn how to be more with your body versus like thinking about it. And I think that's like where people need to go, instead of just trying to like psychoanalyze everything. I think you can
100%.
psychoanalyze things sometimes, but we're doing it too much, which is
Yeah.
issue.
Well, and most people in the world today are very disconnected from their body. And
Mhm.
it's like, people will have, I don't know, a weird growth or like I don't know, a wound or something for months and be like, maybe I should see the doctor about this. Oh, I didn't even know it was there. Like, how do
Yeah.
you not, like, you don't know what kind of medication you take. You don't know what it's for. You just,
Yeah.
I can't even comprehend the
Yeah.
disconnect. Um, but no, I completely agree in helping people access that. And but the other thing is too, like there's a reason why people are in their heads, right? It's you don't feel safe in your body, or you had an instant of something in your life, whether before you can remember or not. But there's a reason that you have been set off on this journey of stay in your mind. And
Yeah.
so sometimes you have to work. Well, anyways, exactly what you're saying, but that's why I went NLP. I'm like, if I can help connect the unconscious mind and the conscious mind to work through some of these things so that we can then be more comfortable in our bodies and do the breath work, even if it's just a deep breath. Like it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be fucking rocket science. It's
Yeah.
as you're saying, if you acknowledge the anxiety versus try to push it away, if you resist resisting, it just creates more resistance.
Yeah.
It doesn't help, right? Then
No.
you get more anxiety. Great. Nobody wants that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. In the closing question, they say that what has got you to where you are isn't what's going to get you where you're going. And so with that, I'd love to hear about how your personal internal dialogue has been shifting lately and how you see it shaping as you move forward into this next chapter of your life.
Ooh. I think for me, one of the biggest things, and then I talk about this a lot, is like the whole idea of, and this could be as an entrepreneur or anything, but especially with entrepreneurs, is like this whole idea of like winging it. So winging it in like your business or winging it in like your personal growth and kind of just not really having any structure or a game plan for things. And so this was something that I've done a lot of my life, with having ADHD and anything else. Like people with ADHD don't like to have a structure. When we have like too much of a schedule or a calendar that has a million things, it makes us feel really caged in. And so a lot of people with ADHD, the idea of adding some structure and organization feels stressful. And so over the years, I have become more structured and whatnot, but never too much because I will never do that. But I realized, I think for me, that there are things that like I want to continue to get more like structured with, if that makes sense. And it's structured in any sense of the word, whether it's like more structured with how I budget or more structured with like, and it's funny because most people who probably look at my life and be like, Alexis, you're like the most structured routine person. But for me, there's certain things that I'm very structured and routine with and some that I'm not. And so for me, I want to continue to find a way to do it. And this is like a big pillar in my coaching is like, I tell people, I don't teach you my secret sauce. I help you find your secret sauce because the way you're going to be successful is not going to be the same as everybody else. And so I'm continuing to hone in on my secret sauce, not so I can teach it to other people, but so I can teach them how I found it so then they can find theirs. And so while I teach about organization, going back full circle moment to me talking about imperfect consistency, I am not always the best with it. Again, I'm probably way more organized than like the average person for sure, but I want to continue to improve that, not in like a,
Yeah.
super dictator type of way, but in a way that continues to like work for me. So it's not just like crossing my fingers and like hoping everything works. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's really, it's not as philosophical, I guess, but that's really like what I'm trying to improve on. So
Yeah. Well, and when you mix that with continuing to trust your intuition, as you mentioned before, it's like, I don't know how you ever go wrong,
yeah, exactly. And you
right? It's
can't,
like,
because even if you fail, because it's the big thing that I talk about, literally
yeah,
just launching a new YouTube channel on
it's my
Monday called
next question.
Failure
It's
Diaries.
beautiful. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah. Again.
I'm launching a YouTube channel, and I had one before, but I stopped a bit ago. But I'm launching a YouTube channel on Monday and just launched a TikTok, and they're connected. They're both called the Failure Diaries, and it's essentially because I was looking it up and I was like, I don't see anybody else doing this because there's rarely anything that anybody can do on the internet nowadays that's like I'm the first person to do it. Not that that
Yeah.
matters, but most people are not like out there like highlighting their failures consistently. And I have always done that on my social media. It's a reason why a lot of people follow me. I love talking about how I'm failing and how I'm fucking up and all these things. And so the like I very much talk a lot about like getting past the fear of failure. And so to me, I just look at failure as data. So even if I am trying something and like it doesn't work, like yeah, I'm allowed to like be upset by it, but like all it is just going to be like, okay, what did this teach me? Now I get to go be better at that thing. And so this failure diaries thing is going to be what the YouTube's just going to be a vlog once or twice a month. I'm going to try to get to 4 times a month where I'm just vlogging different failures and fuck ups, whether it's like this is what actually happened this week, or if it's like a story time sharing about past things. And then I also want to purposely go try things where I know I'm not going to be good at them and I know I'm going to fail. Like if I'm going to go purposely go for something and I know I'm going to get rejected, or
Yeah.
try like a pottery class and I'm going to be absolutely terrible at it because art is not my thing. And so it's like things like that just to show people like, did I die? No, I'm fine. And so the TikTok is just bits and pieces of the YouTube channel, but with the first year, I'm doing 365 days. So and 2 days ago was the first day. So one day or one failure every day for a year that I'm going to
Yep.
share on that page. And so anyway, I'm just sharing that because like even if I fuck up and doing any of the things that I do, it's really not a failure because it just like didn't work out the way that I want and now I get to like learn from that. So
Yeah. I'd love to hear about one of your favorite failures that you haven't shared yet. I know you just said you just started it, but if you have
yeah.
one you're fucking pumped to come,
Yeah, oh my gosh, I share everything on my page. Favorite failures. I would honestly say, and it's so weird to me because the way I've shifted my brain, anything that I look at that comes up, I'm like, oh, that was a good thing. Like it doesn't
100%.
even feel like a failure to me. But so I did network marketing for 8 years. I know some people have like different, opinions on network marketing, but I did network marketing for 8 years and was really successful with it. 6-figure business, had a huge team, did all the things, but I decided to walk away from it back in 2020, I think. Yeah,
Mhm.
2020 or 2021. And I spent 8 years doing that. and build up a team, had all these people underneath me. And when you walk away from a team in network marketing, you leave crumbs,
Yeah.
and everybody's out there to fend for themselves because you're the leader, and they have their own individual teams, but they no longer have like the mothership. And so deciding to walk away from that was honestly one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, because like I knew people were going to be upset with me. I knew people weren't going to realize that I was doing what was best for me. And it was nothing against anything. It was just my time to leave. So I very much felt like I had failed those people. A lot of these people
Mm.
have been looking up to me for years, and I just walked away. And I like prepped them. I didn't just like bounce and never talk to anybody again. I always
Yeah.
told them to reach
Ghosted.
out to me. Yeah, no, I didn't ghost anybody, but it very much felt, I mean, I walked away from a business I built for 8 years and just decided to, because I'd always been doing what I'm doing now. It had always been behind the scenes, but now it had come to the forefront, and I had to
Yeah.
like switch my Instagram. So all of those things. So it very much was like, you have a business and then you decide to walk away from it. So I would say that definitely is my favorite, because I would not have the business that I have now. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And my life in no way, shape, or form would be the same. Because my mentor said to me at the time when I was thinking about leaving, she was like, you'll never make as much money work like selling someone else's things as you will selling your own. And it's
Hmm.
an obvious thing, but I was like, oh, because I'd made great money in that, but I was like, what if I made 100% of my profits, not like 30%,
Right.
so yeah.
Well, that goes full circle back into major life changes to how we started off. Um, that was probably one of, if you're saying your favorite failure, but like a major life change that literally just changes the trajectory of your life forever. So,
Oh, it did for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
As a very light last question, if you were fighting someone 2 minutes from now, what song would you put on right fucking now?
Fighting, like physically fighting.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
What are you getting amped up to fucking do some shit?
Oh my gosh. Music is like my favorite thing. So like I have such a range of songs that I would
I know.
listen to. It would I can't, I'm trying to think of like one specifically. I listen to a lot of electronic music, so I listen
Sure.
to a lot of bass heavy, like dubstep type of music.
Hmm.
And so mine would probably be like something along those lines. Like I don't know if you
Okay.
know who Excision is or whatever. I can't think of any songs specifically, but it
That's
would
all
be
right.
something like really like bassy and it's like a lot of robot sounds and stuff. Like
Yep.
I like to listen to a lot of that stuff at the gym. So it would be one of those. I can't think of any names, but it would be something like just nasty like
Nice.
that. Yeah.
No, that works. I
I
don't know
love
the
that.
names of any of those artists anyways, so
It's
it's
okay. It's
yeah.
okay.
So for promotion, what projects you working on? You taking on clients right now? What's that look like for you? If people are interested in what you're doing and want to reach out, or where
Yeah.
can we direct them to?
Yeah, so I am at the Tough Love Coach on Instagram. And that's like mainly where I stay. I obviously have this new YouTube channel and my TikTok, the Failure Diaries. There's as of right now, there's no business connected to that. It's kind of just like a side project.
Yeah,
So you can go check me out on there. That's really what I'm going to be putting a lot of my time and energy into, and I'm very excited about. But yeah, the Tough Love Coach on Instagram. I do one-on-one coaching. I have my Tough Love Collective, which is essentially like my ongoing group mentorship. You can join whenever, leave whenever, and that embodies what we were talking about earlier, like that accountability piece. I teach things in there. There's a group chat for support. We have a group, things like that, but a lot of it is just like accountability. We have 2 calls every month, but every week, 3 times a week, I do a focus hour on Zoom. So you just hop on, it's like body doubling, and you just get work done. So people will come on, they'll read, they'll get work done, they'll do the thing that they've been procrastinating on, the most. And so there's a lot of accountability in that group. So for the people who like, whether you have a business or not, if you just need accountability to like get your shit together, you're gonna wanna join that group. It's just a consistent place to have that accountability. And so those are the only really 2 things I have going on right now. I have some projects that I'll be sharing, but you can check that out on Instagram. I am
sure.
taking new one-on-one clients. But yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me. Oh, I also have a podcast too. Forgot about that. It's XOXO, your Tough Love Coach podcast.
Yeah,
And it's a little bit different. It's like short form, like 5 to 20 minute episodes. And it's more of like tough love pep talks, because
Mm.
I know that there's so much information out there. Occasionally I'll have episodes where we like actually talk about like information, but a lot of it is just like your Monday morning, I need a kick in the ass type of chats. Like that's what
Awesome.
that's for. So
Yeah, cool.
yeah.
No, it's great to connect again and like not again for the first
Yeah.
time or continue
Yeah.
to, but to go a
Yeah.
little bit more in depth and hear more about you. One of my
Yeah.
favorite memories, yeah, I forget how you describe me, like your chill uncle or whatever. I forget what you
Yeah, you
said.
said you were like the safe uncle or fun uncle or something like
Yeah,
that. One of our
yeah.
mastermind calls. Yeah.
No, that was cool. But I
Yeah.
never thought it's neat because I am an uncle. But anyways, for
Yeah. No, you
a
definitely
relative
get on
stranger to
better.
have that vibe come across, it's nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to sit down with me, Alexis.
Of course. I appreciate it so much. This was a great conversation.
Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.